Am I the only one who's checking his phone constantly to see what move I need to play for my correspondence games? It seems that no matter how many correspondence games that I put up, I am always the one who has played all their moves, and I have no notification saying that there are new moves on my correspondence games. Okay, maybe I don't play as many correspondence games as a lot of other people. I have around 10 going on right now, but I have seen accounts with like a lot. You got to scroll quite a bit. It was like 50 or something like that. And so so the thing is, I don't want to get to that point where all of a sudden I get like 20 notifications for moves and have to go through them. I just want like a consistent rolling correspondence game, level. And I think it's the time control. I think the default is kind of like 3 days per move, which is a little too long for me. I kind of want maybe like a few hours per move. I don't know. I want a day per move, but then it's like multiple moves per day, but I also need to be able to sleep, Anyway, I want more more moves to play in my correspondence games. Welcome to Start Point, the show about Go for Go fans away from the board. And today the topic of discussion is reasons to get a Go teacher. So I know everyone would probably know that getting a Go teacher is a good idea overall, and it may be pretty apparent why, but I want to go through some of my own thoughts and experiences with Go teachers. I haven't really had a formal, consistent, long-term Go teacher where I spent a lot of time with them, but I have, had a couple of them. And I think even just that experience has taught me a lot about why it might be important to have a Go teacher and what kind of benefits you can get from having a Go teacher. So that's what I want to talk about. I have 7 different reasons laid out here. So let's get right into it. Reason number 1, for lack of a better way to say this one, reason number 1 unlocks a higher level of reflection. So to illustrate this reason, let me just tell you my experience with the first time that I considered getting any kind of teacher. And there's a teacher named Kaz, and he's a Japanese ex-insei, and he still does lessons, I believe, if you look him up online. But it appealed to me because he did lessons that were not like in-person sessions where you had to do any kind of call. He would just ask you for some games, and then he would diagnose your issues and give you certain problems. And one of the things he did, I don't know if this is something he still does, because I think subsequent lessons after this he didn't really do this, but one of the things he did when he first started teaching me was, before he even got into my games, before he even got to the problems he was going to give me, he gave me a set of questions to kind of like see where my understanding was at. I had sent him some games. He looked at the level of the games that I was playing, and then he found some issues with the games. But instead of just telling me what the issues were, he composed certain problems, and he sent me some problems. And the problems were like, what do you think of this move? Or, what's a better move than this? And I would look at that and I would think, like, I would take that question, and normally I wouldn't really think too much about it. Maybe I would just kind of give a quick answer and be like, oh yeah, that one's a terrible move because it's the wrong direction of play. I don't know, something. But the fact that I was going to submit this written answer to this higher level player, much, much, much higher level player, made me really actually reflect. So before he even did a lick of teaching to me, before he even gave me any of his wisdom, just by asking me a question made me think harder about what I was playing and what kind of moves were played out on the board. So what I'm trying to get at here is that having a Go teacher, having this presence of someone who is stronger with you, can maybe kind of encourage and enhance your thinking experience about the board. Whereas, if you didn't have the teacher, you might kind of just jump to certain conclusions thinking you can do no better than those things. But having that person out there, a mentor, really kind of encourages you to think deeply about what your, what your reasoning is. And it's kind of hard to explain, but it's kind of also analogous to, I don't know if anyone else has experienced playing music or sports or something like that, but you have this kind of level of skill when you're playing or practicing whatever art or discipline that you're in. And then when you go in front of people, like an audience or in front of a teacher, you notice you try harder and you think harder and you try to actually get things a little more perfect. And this is, I have a design background. I majored in landscape architecture. I know it's kind of a stretch from the topic of what we're talking about here, but this design background also taught me I perform a lot better in front of my peers when I have to do a presentation after I do my work and I have my mock-ups all set up and I put them up on the board. I just try harder because I know other people are going to be looking at it. I know other people are going to be thinking about it. So I try to think about what they would think about. And so likewise, having a teacher can really make you think deeper about your moves. Just the mere presence of them. Reason number 2, a teacher can point out what you're not thinking about. So self-study can go a long way. It's great. You can really drill down on a lot of your own weaknesses and try to round out your game. But the problem is that you can't see what you're not even considering. One of the problems that Kaz gave me was, well, not just one of the problems, many of the problems that Kaz would give me, I would look at them and they were constructed from my own games. And they were moves that I was kind of just looking at, thinking, I didn't know this was at all important. I didn't know this was something I should have thought about. I just thought, this part was an uninteresting part of the game, and I just kind of moved on and reflected on other parts of the game. But he had very important things to say about certain areas of the game. And it's especially difficult to self-study things in the opening. That's where kind of, in the middle game, things have developed to the point where things are kind of life and death related, and you have to play a lot of the urgent moves. But in the opening, it's a lot about principles. It's a lot about what you really should be doing. And it may not reflect necessarily in your studies or even in AI analysis. But a teacher will immediately recognize when your opening is weak and when you have some very clear mistakes. And so the reason here a teacher can point out what you're not thinking about, it's just having somebody out there looking at what you're looking at and pointing out things that you just kind of gloss over. I mean, these things everybody has. When you try to improve your own game, you just go through and you find certain things. And it's great to find those things that you think that are weaknesses, things that you need to work on. And working on those things will definitely improve your game. But let me assure you, you're likely overlooking certain parts of your game. And someone to point those parts of your game can point out those parts and help you out really well. Reason number 3, a teacher can fix your style. So this is related maybe to the previous reason, but more about an abstract, general point of view rather than specific things you may have overlooked. But you may not really know what your own style is, or maybe style is the wrong word, because I think style is maybe associated with a more neutral term where anyone can be good and have a different style. But what I mean by this is you have a general slant in your strategy and the types of moves you like to play and the types of mentalities that you go into the game with. And it may be difficult to see your own style and what your own tendencies are, because when you go into the game, you may actually just have a goal of playing as normal as possible. And playing as normal as possible, other people may actually notice that you're not playing very normal at all, whereas it's normal to you. And so a Go teacher can look at your game and think, you're being very scared when you play. A lot of the times you You play really defensively and solidly, and that kind of deteriorates the efficiency of your stones. Whereas you may be thinking, oh, I thought I had to play those moves. I thought those moves were essential and that this was good and this was proper, but you may not even see that you're playing that way. For example, in my personal experience, I was getting reviewed by a stronger player, and they gave me notes that I was being so unnecessarily aggressive, and that my opponent was also being unnecessarily aggressive. And so this is also another reason why it's important to have another perspective, because if you're playing this person who's kind of in the same weak point as you, neither of you'll figure it out. But I was playing aggressively, and the funny part was that I had already taken measures to tone down my play, and I had considered that game to be something like, this is a game where I'm going to play defensively and properly and safe and simply. And when a stronger player looked at it, they said, you're being unnecessarily aggressive. And I was surprised. I was like, I didn't know I was being aggressive. So whether you're aggressive or slow, or maybe you're someone who focuses too much on territory or focuses too much on attack or plays too safe, whatever it is, these overarching general weaknesses, sometimes they can be very apparent to a teacher or stronger player when they look at your game. And when you look at your game, you may think these are normal things. You're just kind of playing a normal game. But if you submit your game to someone else, another set of eyes, they may point out a particular slant to your style of play, and that may help you develop into a better Go player. Reason number 4 is humility. I don't know why I stuttered there. Humility is, I think, a very important trait to have when you play Go and when you learn Go. And the fact that you are humble enough to ask somebody else, hey, I don't know as much as you, and I want you to teach me what you know and tell me how to play. And not just that, not just the request, but also following through, and then just experiencing the education itself is, I think, an act of humility. And just following directions and listening. These are good practices if you want to improve at the game. A lot of Go players actually, I've seen this many times, they actually argue with stronger players. Stronger player will give advice, and the weaker player will actually just kind of tell them like, no, I don't think that's true, or something like that. And it's a lack of humility. And I think that that's a very clear indicator that that person may have difficult times improving at the game. And I can tell when someone who is weaker than me is exhibiting this kind of behavior when I'm playing a game with them and I tell them, hey, just because maybe it's a casual game and I just want to help them out a bit. Obviously, I don't want to give too much unsolicited advice, but just maybe I might make a passing comment like, hey, you're not really taking care of your groups there. And the response, if the response is just something like, oh yeah, that's because of, I have a strategy in mind, right? It's like hard for that person, that player who's weaker, to absorb what I'm saying, which is that you need to be taking care of your groups in order to advance to the next level. And if you're focused so on what you think of the game and what you think your ideas are, and if you're holding on to those ideas, you won't be able to accept higher level ideas. It's the story that I told in that one Zen episode about emptying your cup. If you have your cup full, I can't put any more things in the cup. And so reason number 4 is it takes a level of humility to get a Go teacher. And humility, I think, is a strong characteristic, I guess, to have for learning the game. And so empty your cup before you can fill it. Accountability is reason number 5. Having a teacher, I think this is a very simple reason. It just keeps you consistently on the path of learning. we are humans who fall in and out of habit and fluctuate up and down in terms of what we're doing. And having a consistent pattern of learning is really important, I think, to develop your skills. And so having somebody to keep you accountable, someone who kind of you can bounce off of a little bit and they can understand where you are in your journey, and you can kind of check in with them all the time, even if you're having your bad days or your good days, and to have somebody you can check in with every now and then, it's a great asset to have. And my example for this one is not a Go example, but if some of you may know that I do like to play guitar, and I've played guitar for quite a long time now. But when I started off, I had lessons from a teacher for a few months, and I always recommend this to new guitar players. Get a teacher, at least for the beginning, because they set you on the right path. They get you a consistent practice routine, and maybe you don't practice at all. Maybe you just kind of check in with your teacher once every week. That's what happened to me. I wasn't really into the guitar at first. I mean, I liked it, but I didn't put extra time into it. But lo and behold, I would check in with the teacher every week, and my skills would improve. And then I found myself playing on my off hours, and then I just never stopped playing. And so having somebody who is consistent can really help make your practice habits and routines and developing your skills, makes your whole journey consistent, and someone else can help keep you accountable. Reason number 6 is prioritization. So prioritization of what you need to fix. Having a teacher, well, before I get into that, the 14Q is not truly just a 14Q. It's a mix of a whole bunch of things where you may be a 10Q level player and you make like 10 18Q moves every game. Or you're really a Dawn level player, but there's just some fundamental things you don't understand about Go, which is keeping you at 5Q. I don't know. It depends on the person. Some people are more well-rounded and all their skills are pretty balanced at their level. Some people, they have incredible genius moments, but it's just not enough to pull their rank up high enough to get past the really bad mistakes that they make. So prioritization from a teacher means they can look at your game and, you make a lot of mistakes. You make a lot of suboptimal moves. You make a lot of moves that you could have done better, and there are things that you could have done better, and the AI says this and that. But the teacher can analyze your game and really hone in. Hey, this move really does not seem characteristic of your level. This move is something you shouldn't be making. This kind of mistake is glaring. I remember when I was taking lessons from Kaz, the first time I took one of his worksheet problems, and he drilled a particular sequence to me that I was a 6Q at the time, and now I look back on it, I've never forgotten that sequence, and I would maybe consider that to be like a 12Q sequence. I'm like, wow, I can't believe I never really thought about the implications of those moves there. And he really tried to extrapolate the very, very important mistakes. The way he called it was like $1 million mistakes and $50 mistakes. And he really focuses on the $1 million mistakes or $100,000 mistakes or whatever before he starts talking about the $5 mistakes or the $50 mistakes. So I think that is another really good reason to get a Go teacher, is that they can help prioritize what you need to work on and really zoom in on the biggest of your mistakes that are holding you back from getting to the next level. And finally, I have reason number 7. Reason number 7 is that a teacher can provide a single guiding perspective. Apprentice and master is a tried and true formula, and it's not just in Go. It goes all the way back into the old days, including things like blacksmithing and carpentry. People would take on apprentices for painting and music, like musical instruments or even composition, martial arts, and even now in the modern day, there are apprentice and master relationships in fields like, when you become a doctor. One of my favorite stories in the Go world that illustrates this kind of guiding light value of having a teacher is the story of Cho Hunhyun. I've mentioned Cho Hunhyun a bunch of times in the past. He is a pretty legendary player of South Korea, and he was the teacher of Lee Chang-ho, and one of the greatest players of Go to have ever lived. And Cho Hunhyun was important in Korea because he won the first In Cup and was really the first Korean Go star, and showed Korea that Korea could also compete in Go on the international level, because at the time Japan was still the dominant force in Go. And so it's kind of an underdog story that I believe that Western players are trying to replicate. But Cho Hunhyun studied under a player named Segoe Kensaku, who was also the teacher of Go Seigen and Hashimoto Utaro. When Cho Hunhyun was around like 10 years old, he went to Japan to pursue Go, and he was going to study under the Kitani Minoru school, but somehow his father arranged a meeting with Segoe Kensaku. And Kensaku is like, he was like this kind of hermit type personality, I think, because he had a quarrel in the Nihon-kin, and he became kind of isolated and stopped playing in competitions as much. And at this time, he was around 73 years old. And so this 10-year-old Korean boy shows up, this Korean boy who can't speak a lick of Japanese, and this 73-year-old master who has just kind of isolated himself from the Go world, refuses to take him as a student because that's just ridiculous. What's this random 10-year-old boy doing at my house trying to, learn Go from me? But, he's there, so Segoe says, you know what, okay, we'll play a game, and, maybe I'll give you some advice, but, that's, ridiculous. And so he gives him 3 stones. Well, Segoe gives Cho Hunhyun 3 stones of handicap, and they play a game, and Cho Hunhyun wins. And Segoe Kensaku says, you know what, I guess the handicap was wrong. So he gives him 2 stones. And again, Cho Hunhyun beats Segoe Kensaku. And then he says, the old master says, I don't know when I will die, but I will accept you as my student. And Cho Hunhyun also remembers something that he said, which is about Go becoming a game, or Go being a game that was created in China, that passed through Korea and blossomed in Japan. And as a Japanese Go player and teacher, he taught Go Seigen from China. If you don't know who Go Seigen is, he is one of the biggest names I think you should know in Go. Arguably one of the greatest players who have ever lived. And then he also taught Hashimoto Utaro from Japan. But until now, no one from Korea had been his student, and he thought of taking up Cho Hunhyun as a student as a way of repaying Korea for bringing the game to Japan. And another piece of advice that Cho Hunhyun remembers Segoe saying was that he came to Japan to become a master of Go, but before he does that, there's something he has to do, which is to become a person. And in Korean it sounds slightly different, I think. 사람을 돼야 된다. And that just kind of means that you should become someone of strong character. And the 10-year-old kid is just like, I don't know what you're saying. But he remembered those words, and he said that as he grew older, he held those words dear to his heart. And I think that's quite beautiful, that he, that's actually something that I've experienced as well, where I have experiences from my childhood that changed meaning over time as I grew older. And And then Cho Hunhyun went on to beat, like 10 years later or so, he went and won the first In Cup, showing Korea that Korea can also compete, inspiring, I'm sure, a new generation of Korean Go players. And, the rest is history. But why is this so effective? Why is this teacher-student relationship so important? I think that you can try to get Go knowledge from all these sources as much as you can, all you want. But one thing that you may miss out on is having a single guiding perspective. Somebody who can teach you the way they think, the way they approach the game, and understanding the mind of a stronger player rather than minds of many stronger players. I think they're very different things. And so if you learn from Takemiya Misaki or Isedol or Ni Weiping, whoever you chose to learn from, they're going to teach you a slightly different perspective. If you try to swallow up every pro player's perspective, I don't think you'd be able to do that. I think there's a value in maybe looking at one person who is stronger than you, see how they approach the game, see the way they talk about the game, see the way they think about the game, what they value, what they don't value. And understanding that, I think, is a very valuable experience and beneficial to your studies. So, who's my current Go teacher? Well, it's Michael from Takumi Go Academy. I highly recommend you check out his YouTube channel by searching Takumi Go Academy. And he also has some services available on Patreon. So if you're interested in those, go check him out. I have been really enjoying what he's been teaching me. So it's time for the DDK Advice Corner. And my advice for you, DDKs, or not DDKs, I think some of the advice definitely applies to SDKs as well. But be overprotective in the survival of your groups. I was playing against a DDK player, and they kind of went off and did other things really quickly. We would have a little exchange in the opening, and expecting him to play another move there, went off and skedaddled. Should kind of just be a little more worried about your groups there. Invest into your groups. Make sure they have bases. Don't let the group feel claustrophobic. I think this is something I learned over time, and I'm still learning, but a lot of the times you think as a beginner, oh, that group is fine, or that stone is fine, and won't get captured. But it's oftentimes very good to just be conservative and just add another move there and try to get out and make sure it's very free and liberated. Now it's time for some Go news. The NAGF Pro Finals, or the semifinals of the North American Go Federation Pro Qualifier Semifinals are set up with Bill Lin and Michael Zhu from Group 1, Shen Zhan and Guan Yu Song from Group 2 being the 4 finalists to become the next North American Pro. This is kind of a special moment here because if you remember, the first episode of Starpoint was partially about the first NAGF Pro Qualifiers, and so this one is it marks kind of like a year of Starpoint, so it's pretty cool. But enough of Starpoint. The finalists, interestingly, so Bill Lin and Shen Zhan lead in each of their respective groups with records 6-1 and 7-1. But from Group 2, Guan Yu Song defeated Bill Lin and Shen Zhan and gave each of them their only losses. So we'll have to see how this develops. I think for you guys, the results may have been out already, but I will update you all on that next week. Some of the notable other players who were disqualified, who were, who lost, who got kicked, who failed to reach the semifinals. Ben Kyo, or Ben Mantle, and Nate Morris, otherwise known as Telegraph Go, also participated in these qualifiers. Very strong players. They all are listed as 7 Dan. I don't know if you can get past 7 Dan in AGA, but that's what they are. And I'm excited to see who the next AGA Pro is. It's great that we're cranking out the pros every year now, and I'm all for it. And let's do a little rapid fire of Go news provided by Gaza on the Pro Weiqi subreddits. He's been on a roll lately, just kind of highlighting some of the awesome news that's been coming out from the East, the Asian scene. Dang Yifei wins the domestic Huzhou Lanka Cup, defeating Lan Xiao in the final, and it's Dang Yifei's first title in 7 years. So imagine not winning any titles for 7 years and finally winning. I feel like if I had come to that, I'd be like, well, I guess I'm pretty washed up and I won't be able to win any more titles from now on. But perseverance and belief in yourself can really take you a long way. And this also kind of answers my question about the Huzhou Lanka Cup, which I was wondering about with the Latin America version. I was like, why is there a Lanka Cup here? But I guess there are a bunch of domestic versions of the Lanka Cup, which is cool. Su Haozong wins the Taiwan Mingren, defeating Lin Junyan 4-1 in the final. So Su Haozong is now holding 8 of the 9 major titles in Taiwan. So he's an incredible Taiwanese player who no one should underestimate. And I didn't know that Taiwan had their own Mingren. That's pretty cool. If you don't know, I remember discussing the Mingren, the Myeongin, which is the Korean version, and the Meijin, which is the Japanese version. And then there's the Chinese Mingren. So again, I think the Western world also should have their own version of the Meijin or Mingren Myeongin titles. And I think last time, I forget what I said, like the Genius or something, but I think it should be the Master title. I think that's because it starts with an M, and so like the U.S. Master. I don't know. It just seems like the appropriate name. Ueno Asami wins the Aizu Central Hospital Cup, defeating Mukai Chiaki 2-0. And so this is her third straight Aizu Central Hospital Cup. Don't know too much about that cup. Yu Chang-hyuk wins the World Senior Paduk Championship, defeating Luo Jihe in the final. This is his third senior world title. And I think, this is something that's cool about Go, is that you can follow the senior scene and all you see are legends. You just see the names of legends like Lee Chang-ho, Cho Ji-kun, Takemiya Masaki, and like it's really cool. It's different from things like tennis, right? Once you retire in tennis, you don't see the old masters really competing through until the end of their days. They just kind of sit back and rest on their laurels a bit. But I think that's pretty cool about Go, is that they have this senior level of play, where you can go back and see all your favorite players from a previous era. And now it's time for listener mail. Thoroughborough writes, "Hello again. I've repeatedly bounced off Sumego, and while I hope they'll eventually work for me, I currently ignore them in favor of playing more and reading theory books. I still make satisfying progress this way, but I know that I'll need to overcome the resistance if I expect to continue after a certain rank. I wanted to explain why Sumego are particularly unintuitive to me, and perhaps others with similar minds as well offer a slightly different take on their practice, I found." Okay, cool. So I think that's more than enough to focus on certain areas while you kind of put off Sumego. And that's kind of what I was talking about earlier. We'll have different weaknesses and different strength based on where we put our time. And yeah, eventually you're probably going to have to do some, but although I know plenty of strong players who have said they didn't do much Sumego to get to where they are. So I think you're in decent company. For me, the joy of Go is often in the inexorable unfolding of consequence each stone represents. According at least to the unique understandings of the game by each player, every stone placed is an unavoidable response to the stone placed before. From this perspective, if any local part of the game is to be understood as a problem, its true solution must nonetheless rely on the global board state. It would be convenient to divorce the context, but to a certain mind this feels impossible. Alrighty, so I get what you're saying, and you're absolutely right, except it's kind of an antithesis to the way I currently play, which is probably something I should work on, but what I do is I'll see that a certain situation may be nuclear. It's like geopolitics, right? You have this giant web of things where you have all these global considerations, but then you got this one man on the nuke button, and it's like you got to deal with that before you deal with like world hunger. You can't deal with like sending relief and working on your relations with certain countries. If this person is about to nuke you, you're like, oh no, you have to figure out how to deal with that, how to neutralize that. And so as global of a game Go is, sometimes there are those moments, those nuclear moments, where in one part of the board it doesn't matter what anything else is doing. You have to deal with that, and you have to make sure that comes out correctly. Continuing on, an imperfect simile might be that a sumego is like handling a tourist a map with an attraction marked and the question posed, how would you get there? To some, they might instantly respond with a short path, or a fast path, or a lovely path. But I would always respond that it depends more on where I've been already and where I would go next than where I am now. A perspective I came... so before I continue, so this is a little bit kind of what I was talking about in terms of the sumego solving. First thing you should do is you should know the goal. And I get what you're saying. I do. But let me think. I want to be able to handle this analogy and respond with a similar analogy. So if you're handing a tourist map with an attraction marked and you're like, how would you get there? To some, you said there are very many answers to get there. But honestly, the thing is with sumego, it's really more like you hand them a map and there's a short path, a fast path, and a lovely path. And you're saying, it depends on which one I want, right? It depends on my values. But in this map, you realize that the lovely path, there's construction going on, so you can't actually get through with your car, or the fast path actually requires a heavy fee, and you don't have enough money for it. And so actually the short path is the correct answer and the only answer. And I think that's a more apt description of what a sumego problem really is, because at the end of the day, you look at the sumego solution, that's really the only thing you should be playing. There's no other real debate there. There's no like, if something's going on in another part of the board and something's going on in this part of the board, I may play this sumego differently. It's pretty evident when you look at the solution for sumego, like that's the only thing that someone should play locally. That's my 2 cents on that analogy. A perspective I came across in the British Go journal might be encapsulated as, you can also just memorize the patterns rather than solve the puzzles. And I think this approach might work better for those who, like me, seem to resist local thinking. I'll quote from the introduction to the advice for doing Sumego series by Richard Hunter, which began in the British Go journal 194, and it is a further treasure trove of back issues are generously available at www.britgo.org/bgj/bgj.html. I will link that in the description, and I will read this little excerpt for you guys as well. However, I have also come across advice that I disagree with. The bust-a-gut approach advises you to keep trying until you can solve a problem and not to look at the answer until you are sure you have correctly read out every variation. That advice conflicts with everything I have read in Japanese books, heard in person from Japanese professionals, and seen on the YouTube video channel of a Japanese professional Go player. In a nutshell, their advice is that when reading a book of sumego problems, it is okay to look at the answers. What is important is repetition and learning basic patterns. It is important to choose a book that is about the right level so you get most of the problems right. If you get stuck on a problem and cannot solve it after a few minutes, then either skip on to the next problem and come back to this hard one another time, or go ahead and look at the answer. Professionals are very clear and explicit about that. The idea is to become familiar with basic patterns, and this is achieved through repetition. When you finish a book of sumego problems, that is not the end. You should reread it either soon afterwards or sometime later. Don't worry about spoiling a problem by looking at the answer. There is no shortage of other instructive and interesting problems. You will never exhaust the supply. Try to remember the technique needed to solve the problem and get the problem right the next time you see it, and the next time. It is really hard and time-consuming to read out from unfamiliar life and death problems in an actual game, especially in a tournament with tight time limits. Why is it that strong players can quickly solve a problem that weaker players struggle with? It is usually because they have seen it before, not because they just read out every possible variation in an instant. Often when I turn the page of a book and see a problem, I think, I know that one. That is one major difference between strong players and weak players. Strong players have done lots of book problems. Where does the bust-a-gut approach come from? I think it might be a legacy that modern professionals want to replace in Japanese amateurs. It might also be advice given by a professional acting as a teacher to a Western insei, apprentice professional Go player. That advice might be indeed suitable for insei or professionals, but very few British Go Journal readers have that goal, so it is inappropriate to pass on such advice to most of us. Some people like persevering with and solving difficult problems. That is fine as a mental exercise, like Sudoku or crossword puzzles, but it is not an efficient method of getting stronger. Okay, well, might as well finish the email here because it's not much left. I hope this helps or encourages those who are eagerly waiting for Tsumego to click. As always, thank you for Starpoint and congratulations to you and your fiance, Thoroughbro. I really appreciate it. Thank you for the congrats and thank you for writing in. This is an amazing little read and I can't wait to talk about it. So, the summary of that whole thing was it's okay to look at the answers and what matters more is your exposure to the problem. Contrary to what many people say, the bust-a-gut approach, I assume, is what they're talking about, is they're talking about the fact that when you look at a Tsumego problem, you should stare at it until you have read out every single sequence, and then, only then, check the answer and make sure you get it right. So, my thoughts on this are this. Well, first of all, Michael Chen, professional American professional Go player, has been known to say that it's okay to look at the answers and you should memorize the problems, and so he's in line with this particular perspective, and I agree. I actually agree. Although I'm a little bit stubborn, and so I don't actually in practice do that. I don't actually look at answers very often, but sometimes I'll be like, okay, you know what? I know I'm not going to solve this one. I'm just going to look at the answer. That's not the approach I take just because I enjoy solving the problems. But one thing that I did find very, very helpful was when I was going through Cho-Chi-Kun's Encyclopedia of Life and Death is to just repeat the problems again and again. And just because you've solved a problem doesn't mean that next time you see it, you're going to easily see the answer right away. And so I think there is a lot of merit to this advice, to expose yourself to the problem and become familiar with the problem, especially at a good, decent, easy-ish level. Because a lot of it is just pattern recognition. And so I really agree with 90% of all of this. The remaining 10% is something I did talk about in the Tsumego episode, which is that the other way to approach Go problems, the bust-a-gut approach, which is what this writer is describing, it's not for training the same muscle. This is for reading training. You're never going to get strong at reading if you don't do this kind of thing. Although the author Richard Hunter has a fair point. A lot of the games, when they turn, when you're playing against weaker players, you're not really reading out anything crazy. You're not reading to win the game. You just recognize most of the patterns. And so maybe there is an overemphasis on reading strength as the deciding factor of games. But I think it is also very important to develop as a side skill. But I think I can't help but agree with pretty much everything that this author has written about in terms of just exposure to problems. Try to get as many patterns under your belt in your experience as you can. I've talked about this kind of thing multiple times throughout many of the episodes, like if you don't remember the woodpecker method, where you take a set of problems and you repeat them over and over again until you get a lot faster at solving them. It will definitely help you create a good dictionary, library, encyclopedia of Go shapes and techniques in your brain. So thank you, Thoroughbro, again for this very nice email. Renee writes, "Hi Justin, I really do like the app Paduk Pop for doing Tsumego. There are more than 4,000 Sumego in the app, divided into 6 levels of difficulty, and if you jump right into the rated puzzles mode, you get 5 puzzles in a row, starting with the easier level and getting more advanced. For example, 2 Sumego level 2, 1 Sumego level 3, 1 level 4, and 1 level 5. If you solve them all, the difficulty would begin to shift to the higher levels that you may start only with the first Sumego level 2, then 2 Sumego level 3, and so on, which I think is a pretty cool concept to kind of keep you always on the edge of your capabilities. You know what? I never realized they staggered the lesson levels like that. I thought it was just like every set that they were giving you was like the same level. I would have to pay more attention to that and see what kind of levels are being thrown at me. Continuing, but I mainly do the practice puzzles, which don't count for my rank rating, but I collect practice points, which is a nice gamification aspect if you want to compare yourself with added friends. Oh, if only I had friends who played Go. What I really like about the practice mode, you can choose the level of difficulty of your 5 random puzzles, 1 to 6, and from level 4 onwards, you can also choose which type of Sumego you want, life and death, Tsuji, endgame, or mixed. Levels 1 to 3 are life and death only, and if you pay for the pro version of the app, €30 a year, you can set extra time settings for solving the puzzles. 1 minute is default, 2 minutes are 1 minute is default, 2 minutes and unlimited are within the pro version. And you only get to play the higher level if you solve a streak of 3 sets of your active level perfectly. Yeah, that sounds great. I like that there's a progression, and I think that's really important when we have some kind of app or collection of Sumego that we have this gamification. I think that really helps make things a lot more fun, a lot more engaging. And I also very much like that I did notice this when I was using Paduk Pop, is that they do throw in a good amount of Tsuji and endgame and things like that. So not just life and death, which is, I think it's great. And secondly, I want to recommend another app. I do have an Android, don't know about an iOS version. It can be found at the Play Store by Sumego Life and Death. I think this is the one I talked about on the episode. I think it's just called Sumego. It's a very generic name, but it's one of the more popular ones. The app also has a decent database of somewhat 3,500 plus puzzles and has even more types of Sumego that you can choose and therefore specifically train for, like ladder, net, capturing race, ko, throw-in, cut, hane, kosumi, and many more, coming in 4 difficulties. I stumbled across this app while reading Kageyama's Lessons in the Fundamentals of Go, where he emphasized to focus on reading out ladders and nets, and that app was pretty helpful and quite frustrating, or surprising to see how complex a simple ladder or net problem can be. You know what? I take that back. Maybe this isn't the same app I'm thinking of, because I don't remember like categorized problems like this. Or maybe I should dig deeper, because I know that I'm using the free problems right now, and I'm still like pretty satisfied with the free ones that I have. But I do plan on, once I've exhausted that, to go on to the paid content, because it's just one-time payments, and it's a pretty nice deal. Renee continues, I like solving Sumego. I try to let it become a daily habit. That doesn't work every day due to work-life Paduk balance issues. I'm sure everybody knows. Yes, I do know very well. Love your work. Keep it up, and congratulations on your accepted proposal. Best regards, Renee. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I'll tell my fiance that you guys said thanks as well. I think it's cool that we had the 2 listener mails today from either side, right? So Thoroughborough saying, oh, I really can't do Sumego, or like I really don't, it's not something that I find enjoyable, or I find, resistance to doing. Whereas Renee is saying that she really likes Sumego and makes a very makes a good effort to make it a habit. And I think I used to be in Thoroughborough's camp, but now I'm currently in Renee's camp. I have come to appreciate Sumego, and I actually really enjoy doing it. But there are definitely still times when I sit down and I look at the Sumego problem and I close the app immediately because I'm like, nope, I don't want to do it right now. Thanks for all the resources, and I'm sure the Starpoint listeners appreciate that too, Renee. So thanks for the listener mail, and thanks to everybody else who has congratulated me and my fiance on our engagement. Really appreciate it. The question of the week is, do you have a Go teacher? Have you had a Go teacher? What have you learned from a Go teacher? So what specifically have teachers taught you in Go? But what has having a teacher taught you about learning Go? those are two different questions. If you have any thoughts on that question, if you want to share that, or if you have a Go story of some sort to share or have a question to ask me, you can comment on YouTube or the Reddit post for this episode, or you can email me directly at starpointpaduk@gmail.com, starpointbaduk@gmail.com. If you're a YouTube listener, I would appreciate a like and a subscribe. And if you're a podcast listener, a review and a rating would also help. Very special thank you to Jeffrey H. and John M. for supporting Starpoint. And I'm really excited to share with you the finale joke that you have been so waiting for ever since I started a couple episodes back. And the joke finale is, why did the Go player fail to memorize his multiplication tables? Because he only did 9 by 9. Thanks for listening. Keep playing Go.